My name is Jason Young, and I am the founding producer of Vintage Theater Company and the artistic director of the Rustic Mechanicals, West Virginia's only Shakespeare troupe. 2020 was the seventh season of production by the Rustic Mechanicals, and normally we mount and tour three Shakespeare tours a year. We have a spring tour, a summer tour, and a fall tour. We have a slate of 4 to 5 special events that we do every year, and we also have a production in the early summer that is done by our high school apprentice troupe. We lost almost all of that in 2020, and that's not unique to VTC or the Mechanicals. Most every theater in the nation, and probably most of them in the world, were just simply not able to produce live events because of the pandemic. But thanks to a really, really generous grant from the West Virginia Humanities Council, which came to them via the CARES Act through the National Endowment for the Humanities, we were able to salvage our fall production of A Midsummer Night's Dream and turn it into our first ever stage-to-screen production of Shakespeare. When the state shut down in mid-March because of the pandemic and the governor's shelter-in-place order and all of the things that happened right around Friday the 13th, believe it or not, we were about 2 weeks away from opening our first tour of the year, which was supposed to be Antony and Cleopatra. And so we took 2 weeks from mid-March to the beginning of April to sort of wait that out. We had a couple meetings on Zoom. We had, just to keep things fresh and to talk about the show. And then by the beginning of April, it became very apparent that that tour was not going to happen. And so it got canceled. And then we had to make a decision on what we were going to do with The Taming of the Shrew, which was supposed to be our summer tour in 2020. And we threw a lot of crazy ideas out, and I mean crazy ideas out about how we could possibly salvage that tour. We could do outdoor performances, but it was just not the responsible thing to do, I think, at that time. And so we pushed it to the next season. And then we were left trying to read the tea leaves a little bit and decide what was going to be best for our fall show, which was A Midsummer Night's Dream. All the special events went away. So the planets really had to align to make this production possible. The first thing was a mechanical from the Kanawha Valley sent me a email with a link to information about this grant from the Humanities Council. We'd never worked with the Humanities Council before, and I called them up, and they were incredibly helpful. I mean, very, very helpful, very, very gracious, very, very understanding, and really they were what artists and storytellers, and they were what we needed in this time. And they said, this is how you apply, and we applied, and we were awarded the grant to produce the show. Getting the grant was really just the first step because we had the actors under contract from the beginning of the season. So we had actors that were technically under contract, but who knew where they were with the COVID situation. But we got the grant, which means we got the funding, and that was the first domino that we had to set up. And then we had to figure out how we were going to do this, because producing Shakespeare, producing anything during COVID is absolutely not normal, and it could be, if we tried to do it normally, it could be very dangerous. And so we had to figure out how we were going to mitigate the risk. And I'm choosing those words very carefully because it was not safe. Nothing that we do right now is safe, 100% safe. You just have to decide how much risk you're willing to take and mitigate as much risk as possible and decide where your risk level is. We reached out to a couple of theaters in Virginia who we'd never spoken to, the Barter Theater and the American Shakespeare Center. And when I say we reached out, I cold called them because I knew that they were about to start producing, and this was in late summer of 2020. I knew that they were about to start producing, and they were incredibly gracious, and they were exactly what we needed. and they talked to us about their plans and their protocols, and helped us work and build what we had to do to produce during a pandemic. And really, there's two parts to producing during a pandemic that was important, that was able to take this show from page to stage and stage to screen. And the first was obviously rehearsal protocols. How we were going to conduct rehearsals, and how we were going to behave in the rehearsal hall, and the things we were going to do to try and keep our artists safe in the rehearsal hall. We held our first 2 weeks of rehearsal on Zoom. And we did that because Jim, our director, came to us from Stanton, Virginia, and he arrived in West Virginia. We got him into his housing, and then he quarantined for 2 weeks. He had been quarantining in Virginia before, but we wanted to make sure we were exactly following the guidelines that were suggested to us. And so he got to West Virginia, and he quarantined for 2 weeks, and then we did those 2 weeks of rehearsal on Zoom, handling book work, talking about the language, scansion, character relationships, given circumstances, the scenes, all that stuff. And then we started in-person rehearsals outdoors for a month. And we were outside in the heat of the day on the weekends, and in the cool of the night. We set up construction lights when it got dark on us, because there weren't enough street lights to keep us lit up. And we decided that we were going to have to endure that in order for us to be safe. The other major challenge that I noticed about rehearsal, and this is me maybe trying to be a psychologist, and I'm not, but I think so many of us that came into this process thought that we'd been off for a few months. We'd been in the midst of a pandemic for several months, but we were all veterans to the troupe, obviously veteran actors. We're trained at acting schools, and we thought we were just going to come in and flip a switch and act again, right? I don't think we'll ever realize how much the trauma of this pandemic and the civil unrest and everything that we experienced, in 2020, I don't think we realize how much that affected us. And I think when we entered that rehearsal in the summer, we were different people, and obviously we were very, very happy to be there and overjoyed to be able to work again and create art again. But I think there was a lot to process and a lot to sort of internally navigate as we tried to do this work. The other thing that we made sure we created in order to produce as safely as possible during this pandemic is probably the thing that I am most proud of about what this troupe accomplished, and that is the COVID covenant. ASC had a version of this. Barter Theater had a version of this. I'm sure other places around the country had a version. But the COVID covenant dealt with nothing that happened in the rehearsal hall. It dealt with nothing that happened at VTC. What it dealt with was the way we, the artists who were going to be interacting in rehearsal, the way we behaved and conducted our day-to-day lives outside of the rehearsal hall. Because thanks to some great conversations with the doctor that we had advising us through this whole thing, we knew that you can't catch the virus if you don't bring it to rehearsal. So our main goal was not to avoid it while it was in rehearsal. Our main goal was to not ever bring it to rehearsal. And so we had to create this covenant. We had to create this covenant that went along as an attachment to our contracts that outlined the fact that we were going to monitor our temperatures every day, no matter if we were in rehearsal or not, that we were going to get our groceries from pickup as much as we could, that we weren't going to eat in restaurants, that we weren't going to eat in bars, that we weren't going to go to the cinema, that we weren't going to go work out at fitness places, that we were basically going to go to whatever other jobs that we had, we were going to go to the doctor, and we were going to come to rehearsal. And we believe that if we follow this covenant, from the advice of our doctor, from the advice of the CDC and everybody, we believe that if we followed this covenant, that we would come to that moment where we took those tests to film and we would all be negative. And that's what happened. We believed that if we behaved in this way, we would be negative when it was time for us to be negative, and that's what happened. And gloriously, it worked out, and we have this product to share with you. But there was never a guarantee. You know, this is a global killer that we do not understand, and we decided that we were going to be what I believe was just cavalier enough to try and find a safe way to make theater again. But there was certainly no guarantee that we would ever make it to this and that we would have anything to share with you. So I don't think this is going to be our last stage to screen production. We want to get back to live in-person Shakespeare. We want to get back to intimate audiences. We want to get back to visceral interactions with the audience. We want to get back to driving around the state of West Virginia and visiting all the cool towns and the cool schools and the cool coffee shops and just being out on the road again and celebrating the state and bringing Shakespeare to the people. It's a 400-year-old tradition that we are a part of, and we want to get back to doing that for sure. The grant allowed us to create this new medium in our company, this stage-to-screen medium. And the stipulations of the grant were that every high school, middle school, homeschool, student, teacher, and parent get to have this video and all this supplemental education material and the curriculum packets that our Director of Education creates absolutely free. And so what this new medium does, what this stage-to-screen medium does is it allows us to reach more students in more desks and schools in this state than we have ever done before. But I think it's here to stay, because if we can add that to our repertoire, if we can be out on the road 3 times a year, being live, and then also have this video content that can be accessed by folks who don't get to see us live, it just increases our ability to fulfill our mission, which is to bring Shakespeare to West Virginia, to bring Shakespeare made by the artists of our state, to bring that to our state and specifically to its students. The show is A Midsummer Night's Dream. The troupe is the Rustic Mechanicals. We called this our Mortal Grossness Tour because we really couldn't think of a better way to describe 2020. Check it out and enjoy the show. In that regard, we lost a lot. I'm not supposed to be talking to the camera.